You're listening to Reverie, True Crime, your gateway to the darkest corners of human nature, where we expose the hidden truths of human depravity. These harrowing stories serve as a sobering reminder to keep our senses keen and our awareness sharp, for predators lurk in unexpected places, patiently waiting and observing. Join us as we unravel mysteries, explore motives, and seek justice for victims as we bring awareness to these cases. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to Reverie True Crime. I'm your host, Paige. This is part 2 of the death of Ellen Greenberg. In part 1, we learned that Ellen was a 27-year-old first-grade teacher engaged to be married and found dead on her kitchen floor with 20 stab wounds, 10 of them to the back of her head and neck, and a knife buried 4 inches deep into her chest. The medical examiner initially ruled it a homicide. Then, 5 weeks later, he changed it to suicide. The police said the apartment door was latched from inside, so Ellen must have been alone. But, as we discovered, that story had holes. The security guard who supposedly witnessed the fiancé breaking down the door, he signed a statement saying he was never there. The crime scene? Cleaned before police could properly investigate it. The victim's electronics? Removed by the fiancé's uncle, a prominent attorney, before police even obtained a search warrant. And the wounds themselves? Multiple forensic experts would later say some of them were biomechanically impossible to self-inflict. Ellen's parents, Josh and Sandy Greenberg, spent the next 14 years fighting for the truth. They hired investigators, consulted renowned forensic pathologists, and filed lawsuits. They spent over $800,000 of their own money. This is the story of that fight, and a case that, to this day, raises one simple question. Can someone really stab themselves 20 times and have it called a suicide? Let's get started and find out what the experts have to say. In October of 2025, Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Lindsay Simon would issue a new report as part of a court settlement. In that report, she documented 20 additional bruises that had never been noted before, bringing the total to 31 bruises. She also found 3 more, quote, perforations in the skin that had not been documented, raising the total number of wounds to 23, not 20 as originally reported. Despite finding more injuries than the original autopsy, more wounds, more bruises, more evidence of trauma, Dr. Simon still concluded Ellen's death was suicide. She wrote that the forearm contusions could hypothetically be caused by fingers, but noted there were only 3 on each arm, indicating, quote, an incomplete grip. She suggested the bruises on Ellen's right forearm appeared to be of different ages. To the Greenberg family and their experts, this explanation was absurd. An incomplete grip? Different ages? That's exactly what you'd expect from repeated abuse. To Dr. Simon and the city of Philadelphia, it was still suicide. For 14 years, Josh and Sandy Greenberg have fought. They filed lawsuits. They hired investigators. They commissioned expert reports. They even spent over $800,000 of their own money pursuing justice for their daughter. In 2019, they filed a civil suit against the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office and Dr. Marlon Osborne, seeking to change Ellen's manner of death from suicide to homicide or undetermined. The case worked its way through the courts. In January of 2020, a judge allowed it to proceed past the motion to dismiss stage. The city appealed, and the trial was delayed by the pandemic. In October of 2021, Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas Judge Glennis D. Hill ruled that the family suit could proceed to trial, but the city appealed again to the Commonwealth Court, arguing that under Pennsylvania law, a medical examiner's inherently discretionary professional opinion cannot be challenged, and that even if the findings were incorrect, the Greenbergs lacked the legal standing to challenge them. In September of 2023, the Commonwealth Court ruled against the Greenbergs in a 2-1 decision. The court acknowledged that the investigation was deeply flawed, but said they had no choice under the law but to side with the city due to procedural restrictions. The judges wrote that the Greenbergs lacked standing to bring their claim. This ruling was both devastating and validating. On one hand, the Greenbergs lost their case. On the other, 2 Commonwealth Court judges had publicly stated what the family had been saying for years. The investigation into Ellen's death was deeply flawed. The court's opinion raised serious questions about the authorities who first investigated Ellen's death. Josh Greenberg told CBS News Philadelphia, quote, "They, the judges, have blatantly said the investigation was faulty on the part of the police, on the part of the medical examiner, on the part of the district attorney." End quote. But the Greenbergs did not give up. They appealed to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, the state's highest court. In July of 2024, in a stunning development, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania agreed to hear the case. This was significant because the Supreme Court takes only a tiny fraction of cases, only those that have broad implications for all Pennsylvanians. Podraza said when he heard the news, quote, "I'm extremely pleased, too, and a little surprised given how hard it is to have a case accepted for review by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. The court can only take a very small fraction of cases, and then only those which impact Pennsylvanians across the state." According to the court's order, the Supreme Court would consider whether, quote, "executors and administrators of an estate have standing to challenge an erroneous finding recorded on the decedent's death certificate, where that finding constitutes a bar or material impediment to recovery of victims' compensation, restitution, or for wrongful death, as well as private criminal complaints." End quote. In other words, do families have the right to challenge a medical examiner's determination when that determination blocks them from seeking justice? The Supreme Court case is expected to be heard sometime in 2025. As of this recording, no date has been set. It's worth noting that Justice David N. Wecht, whose father, Dr. Cyril H. Wecht, is one of the forensic experts the Greenbergs consulted, recused himself from the case. Meanwhile, in 2018, the case was referred to the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office for review. The AG at the time was Josh Shapiro, who is now the governor of Pennsylvania. In 2019, the AG's office announced they had reviewed the case and found evidence on Ellen's computer pointing toward suicide. They claimed Ellen had searched for terms like, quote, suicide methods, quick suicide, and painless suicide in the weeks before her death. The Greenberg family's attorneys disputed this. They pointed out that Sam Goldberg's uncle, James Schwartzman, had taken possession of Ellen's computers before police could properly examine them. The chain of custody was broken. How reliable was this evidence? Moreover, the AG's statement conflicted with the original 2011 medical examiner's investigation report, which stated, quote, keyword searches were done on every computer searching for suicide information, and the examination did not reveal anything remarkable. In other words, the police's own forensic examination in 2011 found no suicide-related searches, but the AG's office in 2019 claimed they did. Who was telling the truth? The internet community uncovered another concerning detail. Josh Shapiro had connections to both the Goldberg and Schwartzman families. In July of 2022, to avoid the, quote, appearance of a conflict of interest, Shapiro's office sent the case to the Chester County District Attorney's Office. In April of 2024, the Greenberg family won the right to depose Guy DeAndrea, a former Philadelphia prosecutor who reviewed Ellen's case and publicly expressed doubts about the suicide ruling. DeAndrea told NBC 10 Philadelphia that there were several elements of the case that made him believe Ellen's death should not have been categorized as suicide. The court ruled that DeAndrea could be deposed on or before May 6th of 2024. Josh and Sandy said in a statement, quote, we are pleased, and so should every parent in America. Ellen's death is so obviously a murder. This case is riddled with delay tactics, end quote. In November of 2024, the Chester County DA announced that they could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a crime was committed. The investigation was placed on inactive status. The office said in a statement, quote, because we cannot meet our burden of proof with the information and evidence presently available, we place this investigation in an inactive status. There is no statute of limitations for criminal homicide in Pennsylvania, and because investigations can take new directions, we are not closing the case, end quote. Joseph Podraza called the Chester County investigation, quote, extremely disappointing. But the Greenbergs remained steadfast in their belief that Ellen was murdered. In addition to the Supreme Court case about challenging the death certificate, the Greenbergs filed a second civil suit in October of 2022 against members of the medical examiner's office, the police department, and the DA's office. This suit seeks monetary damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress, alleging that the investigation was, quote, embarrassingly botched and followed by a contemptible conspiracy to cover it up. In December of 2024, Common Pleas Judge Michael Erdos held a hearing on that second suit. Defense attorneys argued for the case to be dismissed. Judge Erdos dismissed one defendant but withheld judgment on 4 others. During the hearing, Judge Erdos made a remarkable statement from the bench. Quote, "I don't think anyone disagrees the crime scene should have been handled differently." End quote. He added that while he was not there to rule on Ellen's cause of death, quote, "the fact the death certificate still lists the cause of death as suicide is puzzling." End quote. That emotional distress lawsuit remains ongoing as of this recording. On January 31st, 2025, just days before a civil trial was set to begin, something extraordinary happened. Dr. Marlon Osborne, the pathologist who had performed Ellen's autopsy and ruled her death a suicide, signed a sworn verification statement. In it, he wrote, quote, "I am now aware that information exists which draws into question, for example, whether Ellen's fiancé was witnessed entering the apartment before placing the 911 call on January 6, 2011, whether the door was forced open as reported, whether Ellen's body was moved by someone else inside the apartment with her at or near the time of her death, and the findings of Lindsay Emery, MD, from her neuropathological evaluation of Ellen's cervical segment sample." He concluded, quote, "It is my professional opinion Ellen's manner of death should be designated as something other than suicide." End quote. For the Greenbergs, this was a watershed moment. The pathologist who had changed the ruling to suicide was now saying he was wrong. Ellen didn't kill herself. On February 3rd, 2025, just before jury selection was set to begin, the parties reached a settlement. The city of Philadelphia agreed to two things: pay the Greenbergs $650,000, less than the $800,000 that they had spent on the investigation, and have the medical examiner's office re-examine Ellen's case. Sandy Greenberg told CNN, quote, "We're very excited. I mean, never in my wildest dreams did I think anything like this was going to happen." End quote. The settlement was hailed as a victory. Finally, after 14 years, there would be an independent review. The truth would come out. But then came October 2025. As part of the settlement, Dr. Lindsay Simon, Philadelphia's chief medical examiner, was tasked with conducting an independent review of Ellen's case. For months, the Greenberg family waited. What would the review find? Would it acknowledge the biomechanical impossibilities, the post-mortem wound, the bruises, the moved body, the broken chain of custody? On October 10th, 2025, Dr. Simon released her findings, 32 pages. Her conclusion, quote, "The manner of Ellen Greenberg's death is best classified as suicide." End quote. Dr. Simon's report acknowledged that, quote, "the distribution of injuries is admittedly unusual." She maintained that, quote, "the fact remains that Ellen would be capable of inflicting these injuries herself." She categorized many of the wounds as hesitation wounds, tentative self-inflicted injuries. She noticed that Sam Goldberg's DNA was not on the knife. She stated that surveillance footage, key card swipes, and phone logs corroborated Sam's timeline. She found no evidence of an abusive relationship. Dr. Simon also attributed Ellen's death to her anxiety, specifically her worry about the grades that she was submitting for her students on the day she died. She wrote that Ellen feared the grades, quote, would indicate that she had previously given inflated grades to her students, and that this anxiety, combined with a recent medication change, led to her suicide. To the Greenberg family and their attorneys, this was a slap in the face. Joseph Podraza, the family's attorney, issued a blistering statement. Quote, Simon's so-called independent review of Ellen Greenberg's death is a deeply flawed attempt to justify a predetermined conclusion. It includes false claims, like the assertion that a stab wound in Ellen's spinal column was made during autopsy, a theory rejected by every credible expert, including the city's own neuropathologist. By ignoring key evidence that contradicts suicide, like the extensive 3D photogrammetry proving Ellen could not self-inflict all of those wounds, unexplained bruises, missing surveillance footage, an intact lock, accounts of a toxic relationship, etc. Simon builds a flimsy case on distorted portrayals of Ellen's mental health, propped up by cynical distortions of Ellen's managed anxiety, a condition widely experienced daily by over 40 million Americans. This report is an embarrassment to the city and an insult to Ellen and her family. End quote. Here's what makes Dr. Simon's report even more peculiar. In her Materials Reviewed section, she listed 5 expert opinions stating Ellen's death was a homicide. She also listed the Hulu documentary Death in Apartment 603, What Happened to Ellen Greenberg, as source material. Nancy Schwartzman, the documentary's director, was stunned. She said, quote, it's like, oh, are you just getting up to speed on this case? Maybe she needed sort of the Cliff's Notes version of the case or something. They should use their microscopes instead of watching TV, end quote. On October 14th, 2025, at a court hearing, the medical examiner's office officially told a judge it was sticking by the suicide ruling. The Greenbergs' attorney stated they disagreed with the report. The city did not comment. And so, as of today, the official manner of death for Ellen Ray Greenberg remains suicide. 14 years later, we still don't know what happened to Ellen Greenberg in those final hours of January 26, 2011. We know she came home from work around 1:30 p.m. We know Sam Goldberg went to the gym around 4:45 p.m. We know he called 911 at 6:33 p.m. and said that he had found Ellen on the floor with blood everywhere. With blood everywhere. But what happened in between? Was Ellen alone in that apartment, or was someone else there? The official story, the one the Philadelphia police and medical examiner's office have clung to for 14 years, is this. Ellen was suffering from severe anxiety. She was worried about her teaching performance. She had recently changed medications. On that snowy afternoon, alone in her apartment, she took a knife from the kitchen and stabbed herself 20 times, including 10 times in the back of her head and neck. She severed her own spinal cord. She punctured her own brain. She collapsed her own lung, and then, with a knife buried 4 inches into her heart, she died slumped against the kitchen cabinets. The door was latched from inside. Sam had to break it down. Therefore, she must have been alone. Therefore, it must be suicide. Let's look at what we actually know and what doesn't add up. For years, the latched door was the cornerstone of the suicide theory. Sam couldn't get in because the swing bar was locked from inside. A witness, the security guard, saw him break down the door. Therefore, Ellen was alone. Except the security guard, Philip Hanton, signed a declaration stating he did not accompany Sam to the 6th floor and was not present when Sam entered the apartment. Security footage from 6:32 p.m. shows Sam entering the elevator alone. So, who witnessed Sam breaking down the door? No one, apparently. Moreover, questions remain about the door itself. The Greenberg family's investigators noted that the door could potentially be latched from outside using fishing line or similar material, a technique documented in other cases. Was this investigated? There's no evidence that it was. But there's an even more intriguing detail. Melissa Ware, the apartment building's property manager at the time, told CNN that it was possible the door locked itself due to its design. She explained that she once had the swing bar latch swing closed by itself after closing the door with force. The mechanism could potentially engage on its own. This raises a disturbing possibility. What if the door wasn't locked from the inside when Ellen died? What if it latched itself after someone left? Possibly slamming the door? And here is another oddity. If Sam was desperately trying to get into the apartment for over an hour, knocking, calling, texting, shouting through the door, why didn't any neighbors hear him? Why didn't anyone report a disturbance? The building had other residents, yet no one came forward to say that they had heard Sam's frantic attempts to reach Ellen. In fact, no neighbors reported any loud noises or arguments that day at all. Sam says that he left for the gym around 4:45 that afternoon and returned to find the door latched. He then spent an hour trying to reach Ellen before breaking down the door around 6:30. But security footage shows Sam entering the elevator alone at 6:32 p.m., just 1 minute before he called 911 at 6:33. If Sam had been trying to get into the apartment for an hour, if he'd consulted with the security guard, if he'd called his attorney relatives for advice, why does the footage show him entering the elevator just seconds before he called 911? Some have suggested Sam may have gone up and down multiple times, or that the timestamp on the footage is incorrect. But these explanations have never been officially confirmed. Before calling 911, Sam called his cousin and uncle, both attorneys. James Schwartzman, in particular, is a highly experienced defense attorney and former prosecutor. Why would Sam's first instinct be to call lawyers rather than 911 if his fiancé was in danger? The Schwartzmans have said through their representative that they told Sam to get help from the security guard and then to break the door down. But critics argue that calling attorneys before calling emergency services is suspicious behavior. During the 911 call, Sam sounds distressed, but according to the transcript, it takes more than 2 minutes before Sam mentions that there's a knife in Ellen's chest. You can go back and listen to the 911 call in part 1. When the operator asks him to perform CPR, Sam hesitates and asks, I have to, right? You'll have to go back and listen to exactly how he said it. The operator then instructs Sam to tilt Ellen's head back. That's when Sam says he discovered the knife. But here's the problem. In his statement to police later that night, Sam said he saw Ellen lying on the ground with a knife in her chest when he first entered the apartment. So which is it? Did he see the knife immediately, or did he only discover it when the 911 operator told him to move her head? This inconsistency has never been adequately explained. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Can someone stab themselves 20 times? The answer, according to medical literature, is yes, but it's extremely rare. Most self-inflicted stabbings involve a single wound or a cluster of wounds in easily accessible areas, the chest, abdomen, wrists, or neck from the front. Multiple stab wounds to the back of the head and neck, almost unheard of in suicide cases. Dr. Wayne Ross testified that some of Ellen's wounds were biomechanically impossible to self-inflict based on the angles and depth. He had a police officer try to replicate the wounds using 3D photogrammetry. She could not do it. Then there's the wound to Ellen's spinal cord, the one that appeared to show no vital response, suggesting it was inflicted after death. And let's not forget the most fundamental question. After sustaining wounds to her brain and spinal cord that would have caused impaired loss of consciousness, how could Ellen have continued to stab herself? How could she have maintained the strength and coordination to drive a knife 4 inches into her own chest? It defies medical logic. 31 bruises in various stages of healing, some fresh, many older. Bruising patterns that are consistent with manual strangulation. Contusions on her forearms consistent with restraint. Dr. Simon's report acknowledges the bruises but dismisses them. She suggests the forearm bruises show an incomplete grip and notes that they appear to be of different ages, as if that somehow makes them less suspicious. But to domestic violence experts, bruises in various stages of healing are a red flag. They suggest repeated trauma over time. Ellen's friends have said she never mentioned physical abuse, but many victims of domestic violence hide the abuse, especially when they're engaged to be married and planning a wedding. Was Ellen being abused? We may never know, but the bruises raise serious questions that have never been adequately investigated. So let's talk about the dynamic between Ellen and Sam. Publicly, they appeared to be a happy couple. Sam has never been charged with any crime. He cooperated with police. His DNA was not found on the murder weapon. His attorney relatives have maintained his innocence. But there are troubling details. Multiple friends noted Ellen's anxiety increased significantly after she moved in with Sam. She texted her parents, quote, "I want to leave this place. Get me out." Was she referring to her job, the apartment, the relationship? Ellen's friend Erica Hamilton recalled that Ellen was worried about confidentiality with her therapist, as if she had something she needed to keep secret. One of Ellen's uncles, James Glatz, told Dateline NBC that in December of 2010, just a month before Ellen's death, Ellen called him sounding really distraught. She asked to stay with him and his wife. When he asked what was wrong, Ellen said, quote, "I just can't deal with everything that's going on right now." James Glatz said that his wife suggested Ellen come stay with them, but then Ellen never followed up. Glatz said, quote, "We just figured she got over it, worked it out." Did she work it out, or did something prevent her from leaving? There's also the matter of the wedding. Some sources say Ellen was having second thoughts. Others say she was excited. The truth is probably somewhere in between. She loved Sam, but she was stressed and overwhelmed. None of this proves Sam did anything wrong, but it does paint a picture of a relationship under strain. Remember, Sam's uncle entered the apartment and removed Ellen's purse, laptop, and cell phone before police could properly secure the scene. The apartment was professionally cleaned. Blood evidence was washed away. When police finally executed their search warrant, critical evidence was gone or compromised. The Greenberg's attorney noted that surveillance footage from the building is incomplete. There are gaps. Why? Were certain portions deleted or never recorded? And what about Ellen's phone records, emails, and computer files? What do they show? The Attorney General's office claimed Ellen had searched for suicide methods, but the original police forensic examination found no such searches. Someone is wrong. So who is it? Without access to the complete, uncompromised digital evidence, we can't know what Ellen was thinking in her final days. The most disturbing aspect of this case is not just what happened to Ellen, it's what happened after. The police treated the scene as a suicide from minute one. They didn't call the crime scene unit. They allowed the apartment to be cleaned. They permitted a relative of the fiancé to remove evidence. The medical examiner ruled it a homicide, then changed it to suicide after, quote, conferring with law enforcement. The Attorney General's office, led by a man with connections to the families involved, claimed to find evidence of suicide searches that the original police investigation never found. Expert after expert has said this was not a suicide. A neuropathologist found evidence of a post-mortem wound. A biomechanical analysis showed some wounds were impossible to self-inflict. Renowned forensic pathologists called it homicide, and yet the official ruling remains suicide. Why? Some have suggested incompetence, that the initial investigators simply botched the case and everyone since has been trying to cover up the mistakes. Others believe something more sinister, that someone with power and influence has been working behind the scenes to ensure Ellen's death remains classified as suicide, preventing a homicide investigation that might lead to uncomfortable questions. James Schwartzman's position as a prominent attorney and later as president judge of the Court of Judicial Discipline has raised eyebrows. Did his influence play a role in how the case was handled? There's no evidence of impropriety, but the perception of conflict of interest remains. Josh Shapiro's connections to the families involved also raised questions about whether his office's handling of the case was truly impartial. To his credit, Shapiro eventually recused his office, but only after years of pressure. The truth is, we don't know if there was a cover-up. What we do know is that the investigation was compromised from the beginning, and that compromise has made it nearly impossible to determine the truth. As of today, Ellen Greenberg's case remains open in the public consciousness, but closed in official records. No one has been charged. No one is under investigation. Sam Goldberg has moved on with his life, and the Philadelphia Police and Medical Examiner's Office stand by their ruling. Josh and Sandy Greenberg are now in their 70s. They've spent 14 years and over $800,000 fighting for their daughter. They've endured countless interviews, depositions, hearings, and appeals. They've had to relive Ellen's death over and over and over. Sandy said, quote, "We just want justice for Ellen. We want the truth." But at this point, will they ever get it? The case is a bureaucratic nightmare. Pennsylvania law doesn't allow families to sue to overturn a medical examiner's determination. The Greenbergs' civil suit could only seek to correct the death certificate, which would require proving the medical examiner was wrong as a matter of law, an incredibly high bar. Even if they somehow got the manner of death changed to homicide or undetermined, that would not automatically trigger a criminal investigation. The statute of limitations doesn't apply to murder, but after 14 years, memories fade, evidence disappears, and witnesses die or move away. The reality is, Ellen Greenberg's killer, if there was one, will likely never face justice. It's easy to get lost in the forensic details, the legal arguments, the conspiracy theories, but at the center of this case is a human being. Ellen Ray Greenberg was 27 years old. She was a first-grade teacher who loved children. She was a daughter, a friend, a fiancé. She had her whole life ahead of her. She loved Penn State football. She played tennis. She was close with her parents. She was planning a wedding, and she wanted to start a family. And on January 26th, 2011, her life ended in a pool of blood on a kitchen floor. Whether Ellen took her own life or whether someone took it from her, the tragedy is the same. A bright light was extinguished. A family was shattered. And 14 years later, they still don't have closure. Sandy Greenberg once said, quote, "I want people to know who Ellen was. She wasn't just a statistic. She was a beautiful, loving person who deserved better than this." Josh Greenberg added, quote, "We're not going to stop. We're going to keep fighting until we get justice for our daughter." As the years go by, as they grow older, as the public moves on to new cases and new controversies, you have to wonder, will Ellen Greenberg ever get justice? The death of Ellen Greenberg raises questions that go far beyond one case in Philadelphia. It asks, how much power do medical examiners have to determine the truth? And what happens when they get it wrong? How can families seek justice when the system tells them there's nothing to investigate? Can someone with 20 stab wounds, including 10 to the back of their head and neck, really have committed suicide? And if medical experts say no, why does the official ruling say yes? Most fundamentally, what is the truth worth? Is it worth $800,000? 14 years of fighting? A family's peace of mind? For the Greenbergs, the answer is yes. The truth is worth everything, because without truth, there can be no justice. But I do have faith that one day justice will prevail. The truth will always come to light. If you know something, if you saw something, if you have any information about what happened on January 26th, 2011, please come forward. Ellen's family is still waiting. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health issues, please reach out. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is available 24/7 at 988. Thank you for listening to this series on Ellen Greenberg. Until next time, friends, stay safe and take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode. As we close out, let us not forget awareness is our greatest defense. In a world that can be dark and grim, vigilance is our beacon of hope. When it comes to the cases we have explored together that have remained unsolved, if you happen to hold a piece of the puzzle, dare to step forward. As author Lois McMaster Bujold once said, "The dead cannot cry out for justice. It is a duty of the living to do so for them." Until we reconvene, my friends, stay vigilant and stay informed.